issues we always fight, 'cause we never worked it out. It just kinda slipped through our hands. And I never really said that you hurt me, no instead. I just try to understand. It was so exhausting, so I lost it, had to make it stop. Didn't really feel like giving you the chance to make it up. You asked me what's the problem, to be honest, it was you.
Hi guys, welcome back. If you've seen the first part of this video, you will obviously know it's about shotguns. And the reason I'm putting this out now is because Beretta just pretty much clean swept the Olympics for every single discipline that you can think of for shotgun. Huge Beretta shotgun fan. Both the sporting guns I use are Berettas for all my clay shooting. I also work for a subsidiary of Beretta on the defence side. With that being said, I don't get any special bargains from Beretta. You know, I'm not affiliated to use their guns or sponsored by them or anything like that. I just really like them, and that's one of the reasons I actually went to work for one of the companies owned by Beretta. These are probably Beretta's two most popular sporting shotguns at the moment. One was their premier gun, just been superseded, and I just want to talk about the differences between them and why you might choose one and not the other, because that's kind of always a tricky thing, especially for new shooters or someone who's getting rid of their gun and moving over to a different brand. You know, it's always kind of hard to know which line of shotguns within that brand should you go for. Why do people choose them? I will put some info in the description that will have a load of tech detail there, so if you tuned in for tech detail, I have done a review on one of these before that has a bit more technical info in, but this is really kind of an overview for someone thinking of getting into buying a Beretta sporting shotgun and why they might choose one over and above the other. So the first gun we have is what was Beretta's ultimate sporting shotgun, the DT11. This is the X-Trap version with the Monte Carlo adjustable stock. You can see it's got that high rib, which is also adjustable. And then we have the 694, both 30-inch barrels. Kind of similar looking in aesthetic, and this one has the TSK stock, which obviously sets it completely apart from your average shotgun. I'm going to do a separate video on that TSK stock because there's quite a lot to them, and some of the info out on the internet at the moment with the TSK stuff is kind of hard to understand, and some of it actually put me a bit wrong and cost me a bit of money when I was buying parts for it. So I'm just going to make my own video on that and give you guys some tips and some clues. So why would I choose one and not the other? And I've actually got both. Why did I buy both? So the DT11 I actually bought for trap. You know, I shoot DTL down the line, and I wanted a really nice heavy gun for trap, something that was going to be really nice and smooth, and the DT11 is heavy. Now there's some data out on the internet on how heavy these are, and it's not always that consistent. It kind of gives you a very fixed data point for all the different models. So this X-Trap version comes in at 4.15 kilos, so it is not a light gun. But that's exactly what I wanted. You know, if you're shooting trap, you want something that's coming up to target, it's really nice and smooth. You're going to want it really precise. Same thing every time. It doesn't need to be too whippy. You're not going to be pointing it around like you might do with a sporting gun or a skeet gun. So for me, this was absolutely ideal. I also like the high rib. That gives you a slightly better viewpoint. So when you've got targets coming up from below, it's kind of keeping your eye line a bit higher off the gun, and you may be able to see them a bit quicker than you would if you were down on a standard rib. It also helps you hold a more upright head position. So if, like me, you've got some neck pain, injuries, back pain, etc., this might be the gun for you. Now they have a number of DT11s available. This is obviously the X-Trap, which is heavily centered towards trap, the Monte Carlo stock with the horizontal comb on it, but they also have a sporting variant, a skeet variant, and you can get them in a few different iterations: 32-inch barrel, 30-inch barrel, and then various types of stock, adjustable, non-adjustable, etc. So they've pretty much got a gun for anyone that wants to do clay pigeon shooting of some sort or another. They're all going to be pretty hefty guns, and that's because the actions on these are literally bomb-proof, and they've been made to just keep on trucking, putting hundreds of thousands of rounds through them. That's why the pros like them, because they can just use this thing, and some of those guys are putting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of rounds through these guns per year. They absolutely keep on going. You know, they would last you a lifetime of shooting. All the parts on these DTs can be replaced even as they start to get worn in places. Beretta actually have a number of parts and components that they're replacing with, so it always will end up feeling like a new gun. I would be very surprised if an average shooter needed to replace much other than the basic service. You know, I don't think anyone's going to be able to damage one of these guns with what I would call sort of basic civilian use. Maybe if you were an Olympic level shooter and, like I say, putting hundreds of thousands of rounds through the gun, you might see a bit of wear on some parts, but to be honest, I doubt that. I actually heard a story from one of the gunsmiths that I deal with, and he was getting guns engraved for people. He had a lady that was coming in and doing some custom engraving because people wanted their initials put on, or maybe like a little image or something like that. And he rang her up and said, you know, can you come in and do a DT11 for me? And she said, I'm not engraving any more Berettas. And he said, why not? He thought maybe she hated Beretta or something. And she said, it ruins all my tools. You know, there's something about the steel on the Berettas that just absolutely ruins all my engraving tools. And for every one I go through when I do a normal gun, if I run it on a Beretta, I'll go through like 5 or 6 tools, and I just get fed up. It costs me a fortune. So that may give you a little bit of insight into how overbuilt these things are. Now, talking of overbuilt and precision engineering, these are the Stelium Pro barrels. What does the Stelium Pro barrel entail? Well, it basically means it's been backbored. You know, it's got quite a substantial backbore to it, which means it's slightly overbored in the rear section of the barrel, to put it bluntly, and that will give you a little bit of a decrease in recoil. It will change the recoil impulse somewhat to make it feel like a gentler shove rather than a kind of hard rap. And it's also been especially designed to give you a very nice shot string, you know, a very nice pattern of shot, so you're going to get the best possible out of the cartridges that you're running through it. I run 24 gram cartridges through this, pretty much all 24s, because I like a light recoil impulse. Also, having spoken to the guys at Beretta, they build these guns with Olympians in mind, and the Olympians, what are they using? They're using 24 gram. A lot of the testing on these guns is done with 24 gram loads. If those guys can break Olympic trap and Olympic skeet with 24 grams, you've seen the speed of those targets, you've seen the consistency those guys are hitting them with, then any of us can break clays with 24 grams. You know, I know people like 28, they say there's more lead in the air, and I can't disagree with that in theory, but I don't have any issues running 24s. And if you run a 24 through this DT11, it really is a pleasant gun to shoot. And that's the other benefit of having a heavier gun. And for a discipline, if you're shooting trap, you really don't want to be getting knocked about, because you're shooting 100 targets, you're shooting them in fairly static position, so it can get quite wearing. You know, psychologically you start missing if you're getting knocked around all over the place, especially if you're a lighter build. I've seen girls start shooting, and the first thing people say, whether it be rifle or shotgun, they say, oh, the gun's going to be really heavy for you, you should get a really light gun. And that seems like common sense, but actually I'm kind of the other way in both rifle and shotgun. If someone's a lighter build, I'm going to try and get them to use the heaviest possible gun that they can comfortably wield. You know, if they can get it up and get a shot off successfully, then I'm going to encourage them to use a heavy gun, because I don't want them to get their butt kicked with recoil. And if they're a light build and they're getting heavy recoil impulse, which they will through a very light gun, that's going to be really uncomfortable. I've actually seen people be put off of shooting altogether just because they're getting kicked about by the gun. So for those people, it might be worth trying a DT11, although it kind of seems adverse and everyone would say, oh, that's, you know, a big manly gun. I would definitely suggest people at least go and try one. And whichever of these you want to buy, go to the local dealer, ask them if you can have a go on one of these. You know, don't invest £10,000 in a gun if you've never even shouldered one and shot it. At least put some cartridges through it and see how it feels. Now, you can change the weight on these. I actually like it as it is because it balances pretty much central. It's just a tiny bit of rearward, as you can see. It just wants to drop back. I'm holding it on that pin there. It's just slowly dropping back. That suits me down to the ground. That for me is a perfect balance for a trap gun. A lot of trap shooters like a gun that's a little bit front heavy. They want to slow the barrels down. You can do that because you can get weights for these that clip onto the barrel section in the middle, and they can slow the gun down that way. You can also load up the rear section on these. There's actually a hole and a bunch of weights, the Be Fast weight system that you can buy, and they just simply screw into the stock at the rear, and then you can put weight in the rear as well. So if you had the Sporter and you wanted to weight the rear, that would also reduce a little bit of recoil and then have a sort of whippier front end to the gun. If that's your preference, then you could do that too. Or you could add weights to the rear and fore end and actually just add weight all over the gun, and that would reduce even more recoil and slow the gun down as well. So it really does come down to personal preference. For me, I haven't added any weights at all. I've got the weights, I've tried adding them, it didn't help me, and I actually prefer it at this weight with that central point of balance. Just focused a little bit more to the rear is absolutely fine for me. Both of these guns share chokes, so if like me you're going to buy the pair and have the kind of daddy DT11 and the 694, you can at least buy a full set of chokes and kind of share them between. I've got a couple of skeet chokes, I've got a full set of the others, including I think 2 of the modified. In case I want to run both half chokes in one of the guns, I can do that. Now the DT11 stands for detachable trigger. The pros really like a detachable trigger because if they're in a competition and anything goes wrong, you know, a trigger spring goes, which can happen with any shotgun, that's the nature of springs. But if that was to happen, the pros can just stick a brand new trigger in and they're not hanging around and not losing a competition because of it. For mere mortals that are, you know, like me and you, that are not in those high level competitions, then we can just whip that out and do a quick bit of cleaning with a can of compressed air. It's very, very easy to sort out the trigger and give it a clean off if you need to, rather than having to unscrew a load of parts and take half the gun apart to get to the internals. So it's got a benefit either way, probably more of a benefit to the pros, but I actually like that feature just to make sure everything's clean and working properly. If you're specifically interested in one of these high ribs, either the X-Trap or the all competition variant, then they're adjustable. You can basically adjust them up and down. Why would you want to do that? Well, you can either adjust it so it shoots pretty flat, which might favour some types of sporting shooters, and some skeet shooters like to shoot quite flat. If you're a trap shooter, you probably want to adjust it so it's actually shooting a little high, because your targets are always rising. So if you're following the target up and you're printing that shot a little higher than what you actually think it would be, then it's putting natural lead on the target every time. So you're actually pulling the trigger whilst you appear to be under the clay, and your gun is printing above that, so it's putting that lead on it for you. And you have the option then to change that if you wish. So, you know, on the ACS variant, there would be people that would set it up to shoot trap, shoot a little high, and then they would sort of fiddle about with it and have it shoot really flat for maybe sporting, and that would suit them down to the ground. I prefer to keep this set exactly as it is. You know, once I've modified it to get it where I like it, I set the trap just shooting straights at DTL, and then I just kept fiddling with that until I was basically hitting them where it felt really comfortable to me. Then I leave it. You know, that's the only downside of an adjustable, is if you're a fiddler and you can't help But fiddle with the shotgun every time that you have a bad day. If you miss a few clays and you start doing that on the line, that's a kit, you know, because it isn't the shotgun that's the problem. It doesn't need to be altered. It's that you're having a bad day. So if you're a fiddler, maybe an adjustable rib is not for you. The same could be said for the adjustable stock. You know, once I've got that where I want it, I just keep it there. You can see the spaces in there. Beretta will charge quite a lot of money for those spacers, and I've got a cheeky tip. I actually bought a load of M8 washers off of Amazon, and they did the job just fine. You can buy the little plastic M8 washers. Sorry Beretta, but you know, people need to save a little bit of money somehow. So now we come over to the 694. As we've seen, let's see how much this weighs, because it is a fair amount lighter. So if you're looking for a lighter gun, the 694 will definitely be an option for you, and that's coming in at 3.875 kilograms. So a considerably lighter gun. And why might you want a lighter gun? Well, you might want it because you're walking around with it all day. So if you were doing a bit of rough shooting, you probably want to take some weight out of the gun, because no one wants to lug around a heavy gun all day through fields. You know, that's pretty standard. Same on a game day. People tend to use very light guns, probably even lighter than this. But if you were sold on either of these guns and you wanted to employ one for a kind of all-round use, and you didn't want it to be weighing you down, then the 694 would definitely be the gun for you. It's considerably cheaper. It's around about half the price of a DT11. One of the things that is going to stop people buying a DT11 is the price. They're not cheap guns. They're in the sort of 10,000-ish pounds range, depending on which model you get, and the 694s are around half of that. So if budget is an issue, you're definitely going to be looking at the 694, or you're going to keep an eye out for a DT11 on the second-hand market. The second-hand market, they do come up, they get snapped up really quickly because a lot of people want to buy a DT11, and they hold their value pretty well. So if you see one going for sort of £6,000, somewhere around that, and it's in good nick, it's not going to hang around very long. Whereas for that price you can buy a 694 brand new, and actually you see 694s on the second hand market probably in around the £2,500 to £3,500 bracket, and there's plenty of life left in those. In terms of being overbuilt, this is also an absolute beast of a gun. It's just gonna keep on going. You know, again, you're never going to break this gun, but it is noticeably thinner. I've probably chucked up some video of both together and just showing you the actions on these, but this one is noticeably thinner. So if you're someone who likes a thinner gun and who doesn't want a sort of bulky feeling on their hand, I don't mind either, but some people have a preference for that. If you do, the 694 is definitely going to be more up your street. You can get this again in similar options. You can get a 694 skeet gun, you can get a 694 sporter, you can get a 694 trap, and I think you can get the 694 X trap as well. They come with all the usual stock options. You can get them with this crazy looking TSK stock, or you can get them with a standard sporting stock, or I think you can get them with a Monte Carlo stock, adjustable or non-adjustable, as you wish. I always think it's sensible to buy an adjustable stock just because it gives you options. You know, if you're wearing a whole load of winter clothes and then in the summer you're wearing just a little t-shirt, if you put on loads of weight or lose loads of weight, all these things can happen. They can all change the way that you end up addressing that gun and the gun fits to you. So why not have the adjustability? You know, it doesn't hurt to have it there. It doesn't cost that much more to have. And the TSK stock really takes adjustability to a whole new level. And like I say, I'll go into that in a different video. This has the Stellium barrels to it. So it's the same technology. It's still backboard, you know, you're talking sort of from here back, it's a little bit of a wider bore than the rest of the barrel. That's it in simple terms. It's not quite as extreme as the DT11 version, but this is still a fairly light recoiling gun. It's noticeably heavier in recoil than the DT. That will be partly because of the barrel technology, and it will be partly because it's a much lighter gun that we've just seen. The lighter the gun, the less you're absorbing recoil. So if recoil is any sort of an issue for you, then as I said before, you might be erring more towards a DT11. This is definitely not a heavy recoiling gun. I've come across guns on the market that really do kick your butt, and this to me is a light recoiling gun. So even if you're kind of sensitive to recoil and you want a gun that's a little bit more affordable, I would definitely check out a 694. It's certainly not a hefty recoil by any means. It doesn't have the detachable trigger. If that is a really important part of the equation for you, you have to have a detachable trigger, then you are going to be stuck more towards the DT11. That simply doesn't occur with a 694, so you won't have that option. Is that a big issue? Not really, because like I said, these guns don't really go wrong. So if you put it in for a service with a gunsmith, like most people probably will, he's going to be taking care of all that anyway. He'll replace any necessary parts in the trigger mech, the springs or whatever need replacing, firing pins, etc. And you're not going to know anything about it. So for the mortals like you and me that aren't comp shooters, that's really a no-brainer. It's not going to affect us whatsoever, and there's plenty of competition shooters that are using 694s and they're winning a lot of trophies with them. So it's by no means a kind of lesser gun, it's a different gun. Now the balance on this gun is a little bit more rear heavy, and that's exactly what I like about this gun. I use this for skeet, I use it for a little bit of sporting. I don't do that much sporting, but when I do it I use this, and I use it for any rough shooting, so it's kind of my all-round gun. I absolutely love it for skeet. I like a gun that can kind of move around a little bit for skeet, and I especially like that for sporting. I find that if I try and use a trap type gun for those disciplines, I struggle, probably because I'm not the greatest of planners and I kind of need to move around pretty quick to make the shots up. If you're a very experienced technical shooter, you could probably use any sort of gun for those disciplines and make a great job of it. But for me, I need to transition from one target to another a bit rapid, and I find the 694 fantastic for that. Very, very easy to shoot. I have no issue with either of these guns. The trigger feel on them is great. They've both got adjustable triggers, so you can actually just undo that screw in there and just move that back and forward as you wish. And you can buy different types of trigger blades for them, left-handed, right-handed, straight, whatever you want. You can also spec these TSKs. I think they spec them with different palm swells. If you wanted a heftier palm swell or a really small palm swell, you can spec them to have those, and you can change everything, length of pull, you can change even the cast, you can change the amount of drop, you can change the angle of this butt piece, you know, everything about them can be changed. So that's what I like about these TSK stocks, but we'll enter into that when I go into the stock video. The 694 didn't come with a mid bead, the X-Trap did, but I'm not entirely sure if that is standard. I should have asked the guys at Beretta, to be honest, but you can always get one put on if you're a mid-bead person. I actually like a mid-bead on a trap gun, and I really don't care about a mid-bead on a sporting or skeet gun. It's part of my sort of setup for trap that I just get it in line, look down it, see the figure of 8, then kind of go off into my soft vision in the distance, and that's all part of the setup. If I'm shooting something out of the shoulder or I'm shooting skeet, then I just crack on with the gun. I never ever think to check anything other than that. So what do we conclude? You could employ either of these guns as a kind of one gun does all. Personally, I wouldn't use the X-Trap for that. I think it's very dedicated towards the trap discipline. The 694, this 694, you could use for anything. You could stick a bit of weight on the barrel, because this can be weighted as well. It can also utilize the B-Fast system. So if you wanted to weight the barrel, make it a bit more front heavy for your trap disciplines, then you could take those out, use it for sporting, etc. That really would be a nice all-round gun. The DT11, if you bought into the all-round version, you know, I think it's the ACS they call it, then you could do the same thing. You would maintain your adjustable rib. If I was going to do a kind of all-round gun on the DT11, I'd probably lean more towards the standard trap gun or the sporting version. And then you would basically have a kind of beefed up variant of this. You can get a DT11 with the TSK stock, so you could in effect create something similar to this 694 in the DT guys. You would just have a little bit more weight in the gun, a little bit more beef in the action. It really depends on your personal preference. Like I say, I would suggest people get on these guns and try them. Some people will love the feel of a DT11, some people love the feel of a 694. That's personal preference, neither is wrong. Some people like me will like one gun for one thing, the other one for something else, and they will sort of never the twain meet in the middle. Also fine. You know, that's a really personal thing. I've met people that only like to shoot one gun for everything because their philosophy is they get really used to that gun. They feel that gives them an advantage when they employ it for kind of any discipline. I've met other people who would say, no, that's not a suitable gun for this type of discipline. I'm going to use the gun that is really suitable for that discipline, and they get good results like that. Both philosophies get great results, and neither's wrong. Like most things in shooting, it comes down to what you are comfortable with and what works for you. So never listen to anyone who says, you know, you have to shoot like this or you have to use this gun for this. If it works for you and you're getting great results and you're having a lot of fun doing it, that's all that counts. The rest is semantics, to be frank. Guys, I hope that gives you a pleasant overview of these two guns. Like I said, we didn't go too crazy on the technical because there's loads and loads of information out there on that. If you want heavy technical stuff, check the links in the description. They'll take you through to the Beretta site. If anyone's got any specific questions on these guns, ask me. If I don't know the answer, I will get you the answer because I talk to the guys that know everything about these guns. In fact, one of my bosses designed the rib on the X-Trap, so I can always ask him or one of his colleagues about that. If anyone wants any information on who to talk to, where to go, how to acquire these things, you know, anything like that, I can definitely advise on that, no problem at all. Thanks for watching, take care, have a good one, I'll catch you next time.